Choking, tilting. Whatever you call it, it's making you suck, and it's time to deal with it. As stereotypical as it sounds, yes, I am Asian, and I do in fact play an instrument. The piano, to be exact. I'd say I was pretty decent and I could bang out some pretty complicated pieces back in the day. Now the kicker was this recital we had. This was a yearly thing and it wouldn't otherwise have been really special if not for the fact that our beloved piano teacher of 6 years was gonna move to Canada after this. So this was kind of the last one. I was actually one of the oldest and most skilled students, so I was set to play a pretty complicated song. Oh, and I was one of the first performers, so let that sink in. This was my last recital with this teacher, and I was opening the show. So talk about pressure, right? I go on stage and start playing. I practiced this, so I was doing pretty well until a little slip of the finger led to me pressing the wrong key. Just once. I wanted to do this perfectly because, hey, pressure, man. I couldn't let something terrible happen. At this point, I started panicking a little. What was the next note? What was the next part? Was I ready to play the next part? I tried scrambling to remember as mistakes kept dropping here and there, until I suddenly found myself in the middle of the song, completely forgetting everything. Now, I'm pretty sure there are only a handful of things that are worse for a musician than completely forgetting what they wanted to play on stage, and I think more than half of them involve death. Now don't worry, there's a light at the end of this musical tunnel, but I'll tell you all about it later. What I talked about here was textbook choking. It happens everywhere. Music performances, sports, which is where people often comment on it, video games when you fail to pull that clutch in Fortnite when you're up for the last 1v1, and also in school, because I'm sure everyone has experienced some kind of mental block during an important test. All of this should sound really counterintuitive. I mean, you're good at this. You prepared for it. And I'm assuming you did, because if you didn't prepare at all, then it really is all just up to luck, buddy. Good luck. It's all in one word. Overthinking. And yes, it's true, you can do too much of it. And as good as thinking is, it stifles your performance when you think way more than you should. See, complicated performances like video games and sports, they do take a lot of practice. And it's in practice when you nail everything down. That's when you go nuts over every little mistake you make and try to get the habits right, because the habits are everything. For the real deal, you're not relying so much on what you think, because all that practice means you get to take advantage of your brain's subconscious processing power. You ever wonder why babies have such a hard time walking when we can just do it without thinking? It's just like speaking your first language and speaking a foreign language. Your brain figures it out in practice, and complicated actions just flow out naturally the more you get used to them. When you overthink and try to take control, there's just so many tiny things to keep track of that your conscious brain just can't keep up with the load. You end up getting in the way of your own competence. You go ahead and make one little mistake, and then you start panicking and trying to think about it, and that leads to another mistake. And it all gets worse and worse until you explode. You'd find that sports psychologists would say the same thing, and there are lots of actual studies on this. Lots of them find that focusing on the mechanics of what it is that you're trying to do, like your form when swinging a baseball bat or shooting a basketball, makes people do worse. It's a bad place to be. So where's the good place, and how do we get there? Those who play competitive sports or games would recognize something we like to call being in the zone, where everything flows perfectly and you're doing your best while barely trying. This is the power of your subconscious unleashed upon the world. This is the 90% of our brain that psychology myths say we don't use. Musicians would call this muscle memory, where you can perform a song without thinking about where to put your fingers, because they just go there by themselves. You get there by escaping the choke's claws, which is difficult because you can't just try to not feel stressed and pressured. Well, actually, I think that would just stress you out even more, right? So how do we win against the choke? Well, thinking about things other than the mechanics of what you're doing helps loads. There was a study that said compressing your practice and knowledge into a holistic statement works. Like, hips and hands won't work as well as smooth, forceful, or even mottos like bring it on or just do it. For music specifically, I think this is what it means when they talk about performing with feelings. Instead of worrying about playing the right notes, our focus goes more to how we can tell a story through this song, how we feel while performing it, and how we can transfer those feelings to the audience. And these are where the best performances come from. They're in the zone and they aren't thinking about their hands at all. They're letting their hearts take the lead completely. And ironically, the choke goes away if you completely stop caring. Maybe this is why we have that kid that always sleeps in class but aces everything. Cause he isn't scared. He doesn't choke. In that performance, as soon as I realized I'd stopped, I stopped caring too. This was not a flawless performance, and I can only bet my piano teacher was staring in horror from the sides. Now that the worst thing that could happen to me aside from literally dying on stage happened, I could relax. I threw my hands up in a dramatic fashion, trying to make myself look like the sudden pause was intentional. And then, I started improvising. I just played something that sounded similar to the original song I was supposed to play, and I was grinning the entire time, thinking myself some kind of genius, while my teacher and parents probably still continue to scream on the inside. Then I did a glissando, that thing where you just swipe every key on the piano, right before my hands took control and played until the end. As I stood up, I couldn't wait to walk off the stage, but the audience didn't catch on. I got a wicked applause, and apparently my friends couldn't even tell that I messed up in the middle. I guess that worked out well enough, but the cat's out of the bag now, right? It's things like these that make me happier to praise people on their time and practice put into something, rather than some kind of innate talent that they have. Talent is something really out of your control. It's easy to feel like you can lose it when your mojo runs out, but practice, that's something that you can control. And when you're out there and the pressure's on, knowing that you put in the hours to really get it down is gonna make it way easier for you to believe in yourself. A mistake here and there shouldn't spiral into an explosion. Brush it off and trust yourself to get it right anyway. You need and deserve that, because trusting yourself is how you avoid helicopter parenting yourself into a full-blown choke.